Hi, welcome back from a quick lunch break. Hope you got a chance to get something to eat and drink. We had two great sessions this morning, and this afternoon is not going to disappoint. We have three tremendous speakers who are going to give us more insights on prepaid in our evolution towards digital banking. So one of the questions I'm often asked as CPPO Executive Director is to connect with our issuing banks. And we're going to get the issuer's perspective today from Karen Budahese. Karen Budahese is the Vice President of Digital Enablement and Issuing at People's Group, a major prepaid issuer in Canada. She works closely with the Canadian fintech community as well as other partners, enabling them with prepaid programs and along with many other financial services. She has been part of the CPPO since its inception 5 years ago, and she currently serves as our board chair. I'm so pleased to introduce Karen, who's going to give us a great introduction to what she does today. And please remember to ask questions in the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Jen. So I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and certainly enjoyed the exciting sessions that we had this morning. I know I did. I have been in the prepaid space now for almost over 20 years. I started in prepaid as a processor, so on the processing side for about a decade. And then I moved over to the marketing and distribution side of prepaid before joining People's Group just over 2 years ago. In 2000, I was selling a digital or virtual currency, prepaid currency. The internet was new. There were no smartphones. No one had any idea what I was talking about and what we were selling. We had to quickly pivot realized that we needed to print the digital code that we were delivering and generating on the fly. We had to print it on a piece of plastic. This, in essence, was the birth of gift cards or stored value cards in the Canadian marketplace. Technology and payment has been extremely slow, and it's been frustrating over these past couple of decades. Mainly because of lack of infrastructure and lack of consumer adoption and trust. Now, however, is a really exciting time to be in payment in Canada as digitization, as we've been seeing, is moving at an extremely quick pace. I've been asked today to speak to you about some of the trends and some of the trends that we've actually been hearing and has been echoing this morning's sessions. And what new entrants to Canada and to prepaid need to know. So I'm going to just share my screen, hopefully. Here we go, and get started. So hopefully everybody can see, and if you can't, I'm sure somebody will let me know. So I wanted to start just with a snapshot of Canada. I think many of us know and understand the Canadian market, but I wanted to see and take a look at some of the trends that we are starting to see. Some of the comparisons are going to be to the United States, kind of an obvious. We also know that about half of the new entrants into the prepaid market here in Canada are from companies out of the US or abroad. Often some of those companies abroad tend to kind of equate the Canadian marketplace with with the US, and that's not often the case. While there are some similarities, as we've noted, there's also some key notable differences. So population noted, we are roughly, just a little over 10% of the US population. Also important to note is we do have 2 official languages. So if you're looking at doing a national program, that's an important piece to be aware of. I thought an interesting stat that I came across was the number of banks that Canada has versus the United States. So we have just over 80 banks actually in Canada, which I already thought was a bit of a large number. But the United States has 53 times more banks than the Canadian market. It's a huge difference. Canadians, as we heard, also are more underbanked. are underserved by the banking community. So we've got, 99% of Canadians have a bank account. So it's not we are a well-banked community, which is a little bit different from the United States, but we have definitely more of an underserved, underbanked community. I also wanted to point out, I think it was important as some of the opportunities for prepaid have been shedding light, is the SMB and entrepreneurial market, or the small business market here in Canada. It is relative to the US, so they are quite comparable. We've got about 3 million small businesses or entrepreneurs in Canada, which is, relative to the almost to 28 million in the United States. Some of the payment trends, this is a table from Payments Canada, a study that was done. I won't get into the details here, but the main takeaway here is in the digital payments. So electronic payment transactions accounted for 73% of the total payment volume in Canada. This is compared to 59% back in 2013. So it's a huge, huge change, which has been even further accelerated, as we've heard earlier, by COVID-19. So Canadians also enjoy credit and prepaid. We also have this, affinity for our own debit network as well. But we do use credit and prepaid a lot for making online transactions now and for larger purchases. Despite this digital transformation that's taking place right now, there are still a large number of checks in the market. So, we're looking at 67 million checks that are being produced in Canada today, which is a declining number, by the way. But it also represents this large opportunity for prepaid. The other key and similar item is cash. So cash is still here. I don't see it going away as quickly as we may think it is. 74% of Canadians say that they have no plans to go cashless in the next 5 years, which is down, from 82%. And there was even a further reduction when about 35% of Canadians said that during COVID, they have decreased their cash use as a response. So now, just looking quickly on some of the trends from a mobile perspective, we heard a lot about going mobile first. Mobile usage is up for e-commerce, but it's also up for banking services and contactless payments. So 23% of Canadians report mobile banking as a primary, and 35% use their mobile devices regularly for contactless payments, back in 2018. So I'm going to just talk quickly on contactless as well. We have been hearing a lot about how contactless is booming. Well, a key difference from the US is that Canadians, have one of the highest adoption rates for contactless in the world. We've got nearly 100% adoption in the adoption rate for merchants, Some reasons for this is that EMV was introduced, in 2006. We also have a more centralized financial system. So this makes it a lot easier when looking to deploy new technology and make these types of changes. High merchant acceptance, as we talked about, and of course, connectivity to the internet. So Jennifer at the onset talked a little bit about the prepaid market. So I'm just going to highlight a few key points here. But we're sitting close to $5 billion, which is a huge gap, I think, in my opinion, from the United States. So it also represents a significant opportunity in my mind for prepaid in the Canadian market. Adopters of prepaid are young and underbanked, and we see this with the challenger bank programs like Koho, Revolut, and Stack and the like, whose users are seeing alternatives to the larger banks, either as primary or secondary accounts. Prepaid has also grown with e-commerce trends. which represents about 3% of online transactions. COVID-19 has had a positive impact on prepaid in large part due to this increase in e-commerce usage. And in fact, a recent report that was done by DaVinci, which is a program manager, suggests that 50% of Canadians will do their holiday shopping online this year. Contactless payments also increased with COVID-19 as the networks increased the limits from $100 to $250. This really helped to increase some of that usage, and obviously from a contactless cleanliness perspective has also been driving that. Government funding, we talked about this earlier as well. So some of the emergency funding for COVID, we were able to enable some programs such as COHO, STAC, and the We Financial program to be able to receive, for their cardholders to be able to register and actually receive those payments directly onto their prepaid card. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the regulatory landscape in Canada. While it's a fun topic, and I know we're going to hear more about that tomorrow, and I will definitely leave it to the experts to discuss. It's very important, and I did want to touch upon it because there is such a number of changes that is happening in the regulatory environment here in Canada as it relates to prepaid. So Peoples is a federal issuer, and as a result, we are regulated by OSFI, which is the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, as well as FCAC, which is the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. So really is out looking to protect, out for consumer protection, as well as FINTRAC, which is the Financial Transactions and Reporting Analysis Center for Canada. So looking after AML reporting and, you know, essentially the equivalent to FinCEN in the United States. The primary acts includes the Prepaid Payment Products Regulation, and as well as the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act, or, you know, our AML regulations. There were some recent amendments to the AML regulations that were introduced that allowed for a digital ID verification, which is a great step forward for the industry. There are also changes that are coming about that increases our reporting requirements, as well as has calls for stronger customer due diligence and beneficial ownership requirements. So some of these amendments have already come into force, but the majority, we're going to see those coming into force next year in June. So similar to the US, there are federal regulations as well as provincial regulations that we need to be mindful of. And in addition, I wanted to mention that some of the other initiatives that are impacting Canadian payments will also have implications for prepaid that we should all be watching. The first is the Retail Payments Oversight Framework, which means that many payment service providers will be regulated and will be required to implement practices to protect user funds. Payments modernization efforts, or RTR, which in essence is instant payments, which will enable the real-time movement of funds for both domestic and cross-border payments. This is a massive initiative that is long time coming for Canada. Finally, and what was talked about in the panel that just preceded, is consumer-directed financing, or as we all know it, as open banking. So I just wanted to touch a little bit about what to look for in an issuer. In Canada, a financial institution issues the prepaid cards and is necessary to be able to launch a prepaid program. You can be a program manager or work with an existing program manager, and in some cases, you may find that the issuer can also be a program manager. Some of the areas to consider when selecting your issuing partner is jurisdiction. So which jurisdiction are they regulated by? Are they federally regulated or are they provincially regulated? Which networks Do they issue for, or are they a dual issuer? Are they willing to be your partner on your journey? So as you innovate in the market, it's important that you have a partner that's willing to help you with that as well. Are they willing to provide you BIN sponsorship services? Do they provide other payment services that may complement? Are they able to support your product features, such as the various enabling the various pays? So we talked a little bit about, with contactless and Apple Pay and Google Pay and Samsung Pay, etc. And do they have experience working with other fintechs? Now, what issuers look for in a partner? So we do look at a business plan. So is there a well-defined use case? Is there a point of differentiation? What's the product definition? If you're a startup, what's the financial position? Or, do you have an established business already? Looking at your various network choices. So if there's a choice that you're looking for. Something to note also in the Canadian market that is different from the US would be Canadian debit, for example. So debit is very different in the Canadian market because as Canadians know, we have our own network called Interac. So the revenue model there is different because there is no interchange reimbursement there. So we tend to go with the prepaid infrastructure here in Canada with MasterCard or Visa. Operations. So also looking at your processor. So we work with a number of different processors. They must be certified for the Canadian market. So just because you've got a processor that you're using in another global market, don't assume that processor is certified for the Canadian market. So something to look for when you are selecting your processor. Are they PCI compliant? Some of the KYC methods that you're using and some of the providers that you're using. So when you're looking at a KYC provider, ensuring also that the KYC provider can access Canadian data and work for the Canadian marketplace. What kind of fraud controls do you have in place? Do you have your own proprietary fraud controls, or are you relying on other tools or service providers? What your ongoing monitoring process looks like. Your card manufacturer, if you're looking to launch contactless or an EMV card, make sure that they have that ability. Your chargebacks and dispute process, and your customer support. It's also important that programs can support your local payment options. So, for example, looking at Interac e-transfer or request money, these are some of the important transactions to be able to support in addition to some of the others. Your AML policies, obviously this is a pretty important aspect of anyone's program. Do you have a well-defined compliance program? Often we see program managers coming in from other countries and providing us with the compliance or AML policies for those countries. They need to be adapted for the Canadian market. Sometimes that could be a heavier lift than others, but please take the time to understand the compliance regs and rules for the Canadian marketplace and adapt as needed. What methodology is being used for KYC for KYC, looking at your risk and what your mitigation measures are, and again, ongoing monitoring and training for your staff. One item just to kind of point out that's different from Canada and the United States is that in the United States it's very common to require a social security number for opening a bank account or opening up accounts. Canadians don't tend to give that kind of information out. So we do seek alternative methods for verification. Funds flow is another area that's interesting that we look to understand all the different ways of being able to get money on the card and get money off of the card. So the more information that can be provided with that, the better. If there's any third parties that's involved in that flow as well. And then finally, a launch plan. What does the launch plan look like? Just ensuring that everybody is aligned with respect to timelines and the same goals. We're just looking at some of the opportunities for prepaid in Canada that we're seeing. Again, as we highlighted at the beginning, there's still a huge opportunity for check replacement. Jennifer talked about the RFI that came out by the Receiver General. So looking at different ways of being able to disperse government funds and having that ability to reach another market segment of those Canadians that don't have a bank account or don't want to receive their funds onto a bank account. So this is a great opportunity, and similarly with insurance disbursements as well. Financial inclusion and health. So a lot of our challenger banks that we have seen are really, aiming for this particular space. So to serve that underserved market, to help build credit, as we heard from Stack and some of the others. We're looking at parent-child programs as well. So trying to teach financial health. So see, there's some of the programs that we're starting to see. The other one is small business banking. So there's a great opportunity there that we're seeing as well, is to be able to reach that small business market or those entrepreneurs that don't have access to a credit card, for example, for their expenses. And this way, a prepaid product can enable them from that perspective. Corporate expenses, so we've got the traditional expense management that we've seen, but we're seeing now more and more online uses for online expenses. So there are many cases where a virtual card product can be used for this, whereby some of the vendors no longer invoice businesses. So they're looking for online payment using a credit card. So a prepaid product, virtual prepaid product, can easily facilitate those transactions. We're also starting to see HSA, market for HSA as well, or health spending accounts. Again, just adding to the flexibility for the end user or the cardholder. E-commerce, we talked about that also earlier today. There's opportunities there to use prepaid for more secure online payments, as well as for your digital subscriptions. A lot of these can be virtual, which makes it a lot quicker to stand up a program in the market. Gig workers, which is great. So we've been seeing the use of prepaid to be able to receive your pay a little bit earlier. Examples of that, we've got Payfare and the Uber paying out their Uber drivers. Early access to payroll is a big one here, where we see Ceridian, for example, who launched in the US with their Dayforce wallet. These are great opportunities for us in Canada going forward. And some of the others, we talked a little bit about when we heard Jason from Marqeta talk about buy now, pay later, as well as on-demand delivery. So very much in sync with what we're seeing in the market as well. And these last two, actually, interestingly enough, have also experienced extreme positive growth during COVID, which I think the reasons for that are somewhat self-explanatory. So all in all, we're seeing, great opportunities for prepaid in Canada, many innovative use cases that we're seeing, and it's very exciting to see how the next few years are going to shape up and to enable the growth and continue the growth for prepaid here in Canada. There we go. So I think that concludes my piece. Don't know if there's any questions, but you can always contact me. Actually, there's my contact information. And if there's any questions that come up, I'm happy to connect either online or through LinkedIn. You can find me. So we've got one question here. So in terms of profitability, what recommendations do you have for challengers? Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously from the, there's various different revenue models that are happening with the challengers as part of the innovation that they're bringing to the table. In most cases, they're not charging any fees, so they're relying on other sources of revenue to be able to build and grow profitable business. So the one reliance is on interchange revenue. So that's why it is important to enable a product that can garner that kind of revenue. And then there's various other forms of revenue that can be garnered from there, because I think you do need to supplement the revenue stream. So it's not just for not just relying on interchange revenue, but to be able to also earn revenue in other creative manners, whether it's whether it's through different product offerings or tiered levels, for example. So you could have a base level and then a tiered level that can earn some additional revenue.